Live from the New Orleans Convention Center here in New Orleans, Louisiana, from the I keep forgetting that Morale Convention Center here in New Orleans, Louisiana, and we have Greg Cosell with us, our next guest coming up here. Welcome to Real Deal Sports Show.
Good to be with you guys.
Yes, indeed, and it's great to have you on the show. And you were on the Bills a lot this year. What do you think was the determining factor of why the Bills didn't make it to the big game?
I mean, I think there's larger questions to talk about with the Bills, but when you lose close games like that, to me, there's not. It's hard to point to one thing. Games like that end up, even going back to last year when Bass misses a field goal, that would have tied it and sent it to overtime more than likely. Mm-hmm. Those games are so hard. Yeah, when I hear people talk about games like that as if they lose by 3 touchdowns, mm-hmm. It gets kind of ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And, the same thing happened with the Ravens when they lost. It's, mm-hmm. They put all the blame on the quarterback, and that, of course, is what happened with the Bills game, and that kind of stuff gets just absolutely silly to me. But, I mean, I think there's larger issues about the Bills that I think need to be addressed, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, what are
some of those key elements in your opinion?
Well, I think defensively there are some things that need to be dealt with. Their back end is slow. They don't really have much speed on their back end.
No.
And I think that somewhere along the line that needs to be addressed. They're kind of a smaller defense. I mean, I think Bernard and Milano are really nice players, but they're smaller. They don't really have what you'd call a big-time 4-man pass rush. I think that these are things that they probably have to address to some degree. I mean, Rousseau at times can be that guy.
Like Oliver up the middle.
Yeah, but he's not a true interior pass rusher in the sense that you think of the guys that are really good. He's another guy that's a real solid football player. Mm-hmm. But I think that overall defensively they're not quite what I'm sure Sean McDermott would want. And certainly the back end, I think, has to be addressed.
Speaking of Coach McDermott, obviously a heck of a coach, very tenured, very successful with the Buffalo Bills. At what point do you think the Bills, especially with this new ownership group, might make a decision? You've seen it with Andy Reid, all those Super Bowls that he made didn't win. They unfortunately had to let him go. He found success at another, obviously with Kansas City. At what point do you think the Bills ownership will say maybe Sean McDermott isn't the guy? If at all possible.
I don't think they'll say that until they would have losing seasons. It's like with the quarterback issue. There's not a coaching story. You just go buy another coach. Mm-hmm. I mean, Sean McDermott wins a lot of games. I know it's in vogue to say things that people know nothing about, like he was out-coached. People who say that know nothing about the whole process of how he game plans, of what goes on during the week, when coaches work 16, 17, 18 hours a day. Comments like that are comments... sports is a fascinating business mm-hmm. because everybody thinks they know. Everybody thinks they know things they can't possibly know, but yet they say them with such definitiveness. Mm-hmm. So, none of us know what happens during the week with coaches for any team. So when people say things like, oh, once again, Andy Reid outcoached Sean McDermott. So he outcoached him because Josh Allen did get a first down that even the officials admitted he got, and it wasn't called, so that's why he was out-coached. These are just the comments of stupid people. Mm-hmm. So Sean McDermott's not going anywhere. They win a lot of games every year.
That's a good point.
And it's not just Sean. Sometimes you can get fatigued. You see it with Mike Tomlin. Never had a losing season.
Right.
People call for his head. And you look at the Bills.
Well, that always happens when teams, don't get as far. Look, only two teams get to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And the Bills have been a very successful team. Obviously, they've got a lot of really good pieces to what they are. I mean, but again, big picture, I think the wide receiver position will be interesting. They're expecting Keon Coleman probably to be a number 1 type receiver. That remains to be seen. I really like Shakir because I loved him coming out of college.
Yeah.
But we know what he is. He's a certain kind of player. He's really good at that, mm-hmm. but he's a certain kind of player. Mm-hmm. So I guess the hope is Coleman becomes that guy. I guess they know that better than we do because they're with him every day. But, this is a really successful team that, quite frankly, as long as they have Josh Allen, will probably be in the running for, the AFC Championship and potential Super Bowls. I heard someone say, and there's some truth to it, is Josh Allen's problem that he's not Patrick Mahomes? I mean, you know, he's a great player.
Right, exactly. Is he? But one thing I see as a key problem, I just want to get your point of opinion, is the Bills just really haven't hit on those number 1 and number 2 draft picks. During the Bean and McDermott era. And you mentioned the guy that earlier about the defensive unit that McDermott has on the field. These are most of the guys that him and Bean selected.
Yeah, I mean, and again, there's certain guys who haven't panned out, and there's other guys who have. You know, I mean, Elam has certainly been a big issue because he was a first-round pick, and they expected him to be able to step in and play corner, and he has not. But you could say they made a great pick with Bernard. I mean, there's, you know, you can do this with every team, by the way.
Yes.
You know, even teams like the Eagles, where people say, "Oh, Howie Roseman's great." You could go and look at his track record, and there'll be picks that he made that you go, "Oh my God, you know, that's a bad pick."
Right.
So I mean, there's pluses and minuses. Look, they drafted Milano. Milano's turned out to be a really good player. You know, I mean, he's you know, he's a smaller linebacker because he was basically he was kind of a rover in college because he played at Boston College for Don Brown, who has a certain position for that guy, and that's what Milano did. But yeah, so they've hit on picks. I mean, you could say they've hit on Russo. I mean, Russo's obviously not Myles Garrett, but he's a good player.
Exactly.
You know, they hit on Oliver. You know, he's a good player. So you can say they've hit on picks. I think the glaring one, because corner is in need, was Elam. But then you could say they hit on Bedford. So I mean, you know, you
7th round pick.
You can start going through this.
He's dynamic from 4th round to the 7th round. This guy. Bean and McDermott, they pick guys that end up starting.
Yeah, so I mean,
and that's almost unheard of. For the 4th through 7th.
Torrance, you've got James Cook.
Look at all these guys. Yeah. So I mean, now that we're walking through this, you could say they've made great picks.
Yeah,
that's really not an issue.
But the issue is they don't seem to have to get the guys with the size. They're getting good player guys that are playing with. They fit in McDermott's system, but they just don't. He's more of a speed guy, seems, rather than size guy. Because to me, the big mistake, one of the big mistakes I think they made is letting Tremaine Edmonds go. I thought they should have kept Tremaine Edmonds because he's a bigger guy. Terrell Bernard, I like him a lot, but I think he should be a safety. He should move him to safety because of his size.
Yeah, but he's been a pretty good player. Yeah, he's a nice player.
But he can't stay on the field because every year.
But he's not a safety. He never played it, so you're not just going to say be a safety.
But
the safety position is a position they need to address. I mean, you know, they Hamlin and Rapp were the guys. They're, again, I'm not charting every play. I don't know how they charted out this year, but I think they probably, you know, they're not fast. They need more speed there. You know, they need more playmaking ability back there.
Yes.
So that's a position I think they would need to address. You know, I think they need to address corner too. I mean, you know, Bedford's a nice player, but you know, and Douglas, he's been solid, but he's, in some ways, you could say he's a little bit of a journeyman corner.
Of course.
Right, because he'll probably be gone too. Probably looking in the free agency.
Right,
and so forth.
Do you see a potential move being made at maybe trading for a receiver like Brandon Bean was so successful in the past? Maybe like a Cooper Kupp?
I mean, you know.
What does that do for the team?
Well, I think they look. I think Amari Cooper is probably closer to the end than the beginning. I think, you know, he was brought in with the hope that he could be sort of a number one, but he really didn't turn out to be that guy. You know, Mac Hollins probably gave them more than they ever expected. And he'll, you know, he's a great team guy and a great special teams player, and he made some big catches. But you're not necessarily going into a season thinking he's your one or your two. So, you know, somewhere along the line they'll need to address the receiver position. You know, whether they do that in the draft, whether they, I don't know who's available in free agency. I'm not there yet. So, you know, but I think that's a position that probably needs to be looked at.
I think Myles Garrett might be someone in the Myles Garrett.
Well, then you got to give up a lot, and you got to decide if you want to do that. I mean, that's, you know, it's easy to say let's go get Myles Garrett. You know, that's easy.
Easy, but you're giving up a number one.
You're giving up. You're giving up. Yeah, you're giving up a lot.
The Rams did it, and they turned out to be successful by.
Yeah, I mean, they gave up a lot, and they got Matthew Stafford, and they won a Super Bowl.
Aaron Donald.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, you have to decide how much you want to give up for that. You know, the point is, if you give up a lot of draft picks and get Myles Garrett, if I said to you guys, let's say they did that,
yes,
are they automatically going to, you know, is that a Super Bowl win next year just having Myles Garrett?
No. you still have to put in.
There's a lot of other pieces, right?
That corner.
So the question is, it sounds great to say Myles Garrett is on your team, but if you've got a lot of other pieces and you're going to give up draft picks, then it sounds great talking about it now when we're sitting here, right. But is that worth it when you've got a number of other things that need to be addressed?
So of course we got a big game coming up too, Sunday.
Right.
You got the Chiefs, you got the Eagles. Who's your pick there and why?
Well, I'm bad at picking games, although I've had to do that for a number of things I do. So I ended up picking the Eagles by 4, but not with a ton of conviction. I just think my sense is, barring anything unforeseen, fumbled punts, things you can't predict, that it'll be a relatively close game. And there's 2 ways to look at that. There's hey, Mahomes is unbelievable in close games in the fourth quarter, or the other part is that Eagles O-line, which weighs more than 1,700 pounds and is the biggest O-line maybe in the history of the game, just wears you out and wears you out, and it just seems inevitable that Barkley's breaking a 60-yard touchdown. So I guess I fall on the side of the Eagles O-line, but it could go the other way too.
This is same way I thought Buffalo. This was Buffalo's best chance to beat the. I thought this was Buffalo's best team to beat Kansas City.
And
I think this is Philadelphia's best team to beat, because Howie Roseman and them did a great job of loading this team after losing 2 years ago and adding all that more beef on the defensive front and the safeties.
And the offensive line.
They got 2 guys up for Rookie of the Year. And that's almost unheard of when you. That's what I'm talking about. The draft, hitting on your top.
Right. Well, they hit on Quinyon Mitchell, the corner, obviously, and Cooper DeJean. They hit on.
Yes.
They hit on those guys. So that happens. And sometimes it takes guys a little longer to develop. That's why someone like Keon Coleman, you're not going to say he's not a good player. Look, going the first 5 games, 6 games of this season, Nolan Smith looked like he could not be an edge player at all in this league, even going back to his rookie year. Okay. And all of a sudden, he got better and better. I happen to know the guy who works with him at the Eagles, and I know what they worked on, and he got better and better. So, when you draft guys, everybody wants immediate gratification, but we'll see what happens, with someone like Coleman. Maybe Coleman can be that boundary X receiver that is, becomes a really good player. Right. We'll see. I mean, you can't, after 1 year, say the guy's good or not good. You don't know.
No, you can't tell.
He had a pretty good season.
Yeah.
The way that Joe Brady has the offense is similar to Stephon Diggs. He didn't just fall off a cliff last year in the middle of the season. He went from going on pace for 1,000 yards to, once Joe Brady took over, it was just more of a spread offense. I felt Keon definitely played the role he was supposed to, and as the offense continues to develop, he'll get more chances.
I agree.
I think Keon's a great fit for this.
I agree. So we'll see what happens. But so much of this, look, like I said, I mean, they lost for 2 years in a row. They lost basically by the skin of their teeth, and and people then act like, oh, they're missing something big. Well, these games are so close, and I know the playoffs are different than the regular season, but it's not as if they can't compete and beat the Chiefs.
But, what does that do to your psyche?
Well, that I can't answer.
What do you think? Yeah. What would you say?
I don't know. I mean,
when we have a challenge that we're almost there, but we don't get there, I mean, even mentally for everyone, you're going to feel some sort of fatigue, and it's got to have an effect on you.
Yeah, but we just don't know what that is, and it may or may not have an effect. I mean, we don't know. But every season's different. Every season plays out differently. Yeah. We'll see what happens. But they're obviously they've got a great quarterback. I think James Cook has turned out to be even better than many thought, because I really liked him coming out, but I didn't think that he could be this kind of player as a back that carries that many times.
Right.
That Dallas game last year, that was his breakout game.
Yeah.
He carried that right on into the season.
Yeah. So he's a good player. I mean, he's obviously not Barkley or Derrick Henry, but he's a good player.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very good.
And they sort of, it'll be interesting to see the evolution of their offense, because every coach tweaks in the offseason. And in some ways, even with Josh Allen, they kind of became a sustaining offense as opposed to a big play offense. They played with 6 offensive linemen more than any team in the league by a wide margin. They tried to run the ball. Maybe it was because of the receiving core. They didn't feel like they could really push it down the field, because obviously Josh Allen can make throws down the field. Yeah. That's not the issue.
Right.
So we'll see. I don't know if he views this offseason as, hey, it's time to now get back and expand the offense. I don't know. Again, these are things they know better than we do, because they're there every day. But they were not really a big play offense this year.
No, they were running the ball more. They
and even the passing game was short.
Yes.
They didn't really, it was kind of a controlled passing game, which obviously limited turnovers.
Absolutely.
I think they only had 8 turnovers all year on offense, 6 interceptions and 2 fumbles that were recovered by the other team. 8 turnovers. And hey, that means a lot. It's true in the Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts has certain limitations to his game, but he never turns the ball over. And when you have a defense like that, like the Eagles do, and the other team always has to go 80, 85 yards to score, that's a big deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very big deal. One last question for you. The future with the possibility of the 18-game schedule looming near. Do you think that's going to hurt the league eventually, or it's going to be a benefit? Obviously, it's going to benefit the players. Players want to play less games.
Of course.
But you have teams like what happened with Kansas City. They rested all their players, and the game just wasn't even a competitive game. They ended Denver.
You're talking about the end of the season?
End of the season.
Well, that's always that happens no matter how many games. If a team has won, won their division. I don't know if it's going to go to 18 games. I don't know the logistics of how all that works. If the league can impose that unilaterally, I don't know any of that. I don't follow that. Obviously, the players don't like it. But I think it for coaches, my guess is it probably changes the way you kind of play through the season because there's an extra game. And again, I'm not a coach, but I would just imagine it would do that. Maybe it changes a little of your roster construction. I don't know, but there'll be things that it changes.
Because you got to rest guys. You don't want to overuse your players, especially your starters. Then
things like a D-line rotation becomes really, really important. Because those guys can't play 60 snaps a game for 18 weeks.
No way. No way.
That's not going to happen.
That sounds like a nightmare right there. When you add up the numbers.
So it might change the roster. Maybe you need 2 extra D linemen. Maybe who knows? I'm just throwing this out. I haven't really thought about it till he asked me, so I don't really know.
Okay, all right.
And Greg, where can we find you other than one Bills driver?
Right.
Well, basically, my main deal is that I do the NFL matchup show, which is now over. That's a seasonal show. We do one draft show. That's my baby. I'm on with Sal Palantonio as the host. Myself and Darius Butler are the analysts. Normally I do Colin Coward every week during the season as well. I'll start doing a lot more stuff as we start getting closer to the draft. We're on different podcasts and different stations. So because now I've started doing draft work, I'm start grinding away doing all that. That takes a lot of time.
A lot of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, speaking of the draft, I gotta ask you. We'll save it for end of season. We'll save it for more draft time. We'll definitely have you back on the show.
All right.
Thank you so much for coming on Real Deal Sports Show. Like us, subscribe to the show. Also, the fun starts here with Mappy. Make sure you check out some of the best wine around from Mappy because the fun starts here. Yes, indeed. Real Deal Sports Show. Like it, subscribe to us, and keep in mind on the OnStars Plus television network on all major streaming platforms.
Clear. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Greg.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.